All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dig into a really powerful idea, one that can help us find some clarity in this crazy, chaotic world we live in. It's all based on the book, The Hand Pointing to the Moon. You know that feeling when you're just drowning in information, but somehow you feel more lost than ever? Yeah, well, this might just be the answer you're looking for.
Let's kick things off with this ancient idea, because honestly, it's the key to everything else we're going to talk about. The whole point is that for centuries, we've been making this one huge mistake. We get so fixated on the finger, pointing at something, that we completely forget to actually look up at the moon.
So where does this quote even come from? Well, it's from this amazing story about a Zen master named Huneng. And get this, he couldn't even read. Yet, a scholar, someone who'd spent years buried in scriptures, comes to him totally confused. The scholar's head was crammed with words and theories, but his heart, totally empty.
Huneng's point was actually super simple. He basically told the scholar, look, truth is the moon. All those scriptures you've been reading, they're just the finger pointing to it. See, if you just cling to the words, the finger, you completely miss the actual truth, the moon. It's like you don't need to memorize the menu to know what a good meal tastes like. You got to actually experience it, right?
Okay, so an ancient parable. Why should we care about this today? Well, because right now, we are living in what the source calls a giant finger forest. Think about it. We are just surrounded by pointers, algorithms, headlines, opinions, hot takes. I mean, everything is pointing at something. The source suggests we can be exposed to over 100,000 different viewpoints in a single day. Just let that number sink in for a second.
And what's the result of all this? We have more information than ever before, but way less wisdom. We're literally drowning in fingers. It just creates endless conflict, not clarity. We get so busy arguing about whose finger is better or longer or pointing more accurately that nobody even thinks to just, look up.
Politics is probably the most obvious example of this, right? You've got one side pointing towards equity and social justice, and you've got another side pointing towards freedom and individual liberty. Both are pointing at something valuable, of course. The real problem starts when each side insists that their finger is the moon, that it's the one and only truth.
And it's not just politics. This happens with our big belief systems too. Think about it. You have scientific dogma pointing to empirical data as the only truth. Then you have spiritual dogma pointing to faith as the ultimate reality. Again, the problem isn't the pointing itself. It's when we mistake the method for finding truth for the truth itself.
This really reminds me of that old story of the blind men and the elephant. You know the one. Each person touches a different part of the elephant. One feels the leg and says, it's a pillar. Another feels the side and says, it's a wall. They're all technically right about what they're feeling, but they're all fundamentally wrong because they mistake their tiny limited perspective for the whole truth. That's kind of us, stuck in our finger forest.
Okay, so if we're supposed to stop getting so obsessed with all these different fingers, what's the alternative? What is this moon that we're actually supposed to be looking for?
So the moon is just a metaphor, right? It's the underlying reality. It's the thing in itself. It's what's true before anybody starts talking about it or writing books about it or making theories. It's the direct experience, not the description. It doesn't need proof because it is the proof. A great example is gravity. It was holding everything together long before Newton ever named it.
And this chart here, it's a perfect way to see this in action. Look at all these different traditions throughout history. They were all pointing to the same thing, just using different fingers. Zen Buddhism used scriptures and rituals to point you towards your true nature. The Enlightenment used reason to point past old dogmas. Modern science uses theories and models to point to the fundamental laws of nature. You see? Different fingers, but they're all pointing at the same moon.
Okay, that's all great in theory, but how do we actually do this? Like in our everyday lives, how do we train ourselves to look past all the noise? Well, the book gives us a really simple but powerful tool. It's called the high-dimensional key.
Basically, it's a three-question method you can use for any piece of information that comes your way. First, you ask, what's the motive here? Why is this person or group pointing this out? Second, what's the moon? What is the deep underlying truth or assumption they believe in? And finally, third, what's the packaging? What emotions or data or stories are they using as the finger? And remember, that packaging, the finger, that's the least important part of the whole thing.
And hey, here's a little checklist to help you spot a finger out in the wild. Keep an eye out for absolute language. Words like always, never, the only way. Be suspicious of super complex jargon that's just there to sound impressive. And definitely watch out for emotional manipulation, anything trying to make you afraid, or angry, or full of awe. If it's demanding you pick a side, or it seems to constantly need outside proof to back itself up, yeah, you're almost certainly looking at a finger, not the moon.
All right, so let's talk about the payoff. What happens when you actually start doing this, when you make it a habit? Well, the shift in your perspective is, honestly, it's profound.
It's like you stop seeing the world as just a bunch of chaotic, conflicting shadows dancing on a cave wall. Instead, you actually turn around and see the light source that's creating them in the first place. You go from arguing about the shadows to understanding the light. It's like you gain a whole new dimension of perception. You're not just seeing the world anymore, you're seeing how the world is being presented to you. And let me be clear, this is not just some intellectual exercise. It fundamentally changes how you experience your life. That nagging need to be right all the time, it just kind of dissolves. Things that seemed contradictory before, like science and spirituality, they start to fit together. You become practically immune to emotional manipulation, and you find this really deep sense of calm and clarity because you're connected to the source reality, not just all the noise.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem today. As the book says, so much of what we consume isn't really created to enlighten us, it's just assembled. Bits and pieces stuck together to grab our attention and get traffic. It's designed to confuse, not to clarify. But when you start focusing on the moon, you escape that trap. You start to see the underlying unity and, honestly, the beauty in it all.
So ultimately, this whole idea leaves us with a question, a challenge really. The moon has been up there the whole time. Clarity isn't something you have to go out and find. It's just a choice to change where you're looking. It's that simple, powerful act of looking up. So the next time you find yourself lost in that dense forest of pointing fingers, are you going to keep staring at them, or are you ready to look up?